Hello, folks. I'm Josh McGee, and welcome to another episode of the Gateway to Soccer Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, very excited for this week's episode. Got a lot of great St. Louis soccer news to get to. You'll be able to hear from head coach Steve Trishew and player Jansen Miller about St. Louis Scott Gallagher's USL League Two opener this past Tuesday night. I've also got an interview coming up with a guest from my very first episode. Those of you who can remember all the way back will know who I am talking about. And of course, this is a very exciting weekend. We are into the final match day across the domestic leagues in Europe. And of course, we are well underway here in America with our soccer seasons. So a lot to get to on this episode. In terms of the home studio here behind me, over here on this shoulder, got an old St. Louis Club Atletico kind of warm-up jersey. And then over here, of course, the brand new Italian national team home jersey that they'll be displaying here in a couple weeks at the Euros. And wearing my Bradley soccer shirt was really cool to see former Bradley goalkeeper Logan Ketterer, who was plying his trade at El Paso Locomotive FC, make the move up to MLS. He was loaned out to Portland Timbers, started in his very first match for them, saved a penalty shot. That's just what he does in a 2-0 victory over the San Jose Earthquakes. So congrats to Logan. Very cool to see him there representing for Bradley. So again, very excited for this week's episode, and actually kind of a little bit of throwback as well, not just with my guest, but also with today's opening topic. But I want to start off by making this point. As I said, we are on the cusp of the end of the 2021 domestic season in Europe. It's been a strange season, still played mostly in front of no crowds, but it's been nice to see over the past couple weeks, especially in England, a select number of fans return to the stands. It's just been nice to see. No need for that artificial crowd noise anymore. It just helps build up the atmosphere. Now, of course, while the setting may not have been perfect, we've had no interruption of the season. That's obviously what kind of curtailed 2020. We've been able to play it all the way through, and we've had our normal balance of expected results and surprises. Specifically looking at the English Premier League table as we head towards the final match day on Sunday, it has rounded into something that looks somewhat normal. But that hasn't always been the case, especially in the first half of the season. Go back to the very first episode I did of the show. The main topic I talked about was the slow start by the Big Six clubs, and I pegged it on a lack of emphasis on defense. It's funny to look back that at the time, all those clubs were struggling conceding goals, but the two clubs that improved the most will be meeting each other soon here in the Champions League final. That, of course, would be Manchester City, who has the best defensive record in the EPL, and Chelsea, after sacking Frank Lampard and bringing in Thomas Tuchel, improved so much that they now have the second best defensive record in the EPL. So you see it there in the English Premier League, but you can actually kind of broaden things out and look at the big 5 leagues in Europe as a whole as a case in point. The top teams in 4 of the major 5 leagues across Europe have conceded the fewest goals this season in league play. That would be Manchester City in the English Premier League, Atletico Madrid in La Liga, Inter Milan in Serie A, and Lille in French League One, who've actually conceded the fewest overall at just 22 goals. The other club missing out, that would be Bayern Munich, and they have a little bit of an excuse. They've scored the most goals of any club across the big 5 leagues in Europe, and they've scored 22 more goals than the next club in Germany. So doing it a little bit differently, but that's because they have the best offense in Europe. The other 4 clubs, they've had to rely on their defense, and it kind of just goes to show how things have been able to get done here in Europe this season. Think about those clubs. Manchester City, they basically brought in the player of the year, right? Ruben Diaz at center back to completely revamp their defense. Atletico Madrid, they've got a defensive philosophy under manager Diego Simeone. Inter Milan, they bring in a defensive-minded coach in Antonio Conte to get them to the top of their league. And then Lille, they made a couple of impact transfers on defense, most notably Sven Botman from Ajax, a young Dutch center back who helped them out there this season. So you take away Bayern Munich because of what they're doing on offense, all 4 of those clubs either made impact transfers or had defensive-minded coaches to help lead them to the top in their respective leagues. If you look at the teams who were most disappointing this season, who were most surprising in that they weren't able to defend their championship titles here in their respective leagues, that, of course, would be the likes of Liverpool, Real Madrid, Juventus, and PSG. Well, they actually didn't have as much of a drop-off as you would think on the defensive end. There weren't actually many drop-offs overall, either in their goal-scoring record or in the amount of goals they conceded. The only drop-off that was severe was Liverpool in terms of goals scored. They actually scored, as of this moment, about 20 or so less goals than they did in their championship winning season last year. But there wasn't much of a drop-off. It was just that the improvements of those other clubs were so much that they were able to jump over what these other clubs were doing. They basically stayed the same. These other clubs who are currently leading the table at this point made much more improvements. Now, I wanted to say this not just as a wrap-up for the 2021 season, but because we're about to enter a summer where most of the speculation is going to be surrounding the best offensive players in the game. Think about Lionel Messi. Is he going to leave Barcelona? Cristiano Ronaldo, if Juventus don't get Champions League football, is he going to leave? Kylian Mbappe at PSG, and of course, Erling Haaland at Borussia Dortmund. But there's a good chance that none of those guys actually leave their clubs, or if they do, a lot of top clubs across Europe are going to miss out on these players. So what do? Where does the philosophy shift? How do you improve your club? Well, as this season has shown, the emphasis has to be on defense. That's the only way to severely hop a couple of those other clubs in your respective leagues. You've got to go out, do your scouting. Again, with Lille, picking up Boatman, who was in basically the academy at Ajax, a young Dutch center back, they were able to find him, helps completely transform their defense. You got to do something like that. You're not going to get in on all this top offensive talent all the time. So you have to find a way to pick and choose and be able to construct your roster in a way that's going to beat these clubs on a given day. It's not about, scoring a ton of goals. You can't always be Bayern Munich, but you can be a Lille. You can be an Inter Milan and improve that much defensively to hop over your opponents. Outside of the infusion of better defensive players, the infusion of a defensive-minded coach cannot be understated from this season. Of course, you can look at guys from start to finish, like Antonio Conte at Inter Milan, but of course the big one being Thomas Tuchel at Chelsea, completely changing their fortunes, completely changing what they were doing on defense. He changed the system, he changed the personnel, and look where it has them in the Champions League final. Just a complete shift in what they were doing. Again, like I said, all the way up to the second best defensive record in the league. Think about, at the time, right before Frank Lampard was sacked, what they were doing. They were conceding a bunch of different goals. So the influx there of bringing in someone who's got a better system and a better way of thinking things on the defense end could do wonders for a club next season, and it's definitely something to think about. Now, of course, it should come as no surprise that the likes of Manchester City and Bayern Munich won their respective leagues, and maybe even to a lesser extent Atletico Madrid with what they've been able to do over the past few years. But Inter Milan and Lille were definitely not the favorites picked to win their respective leagues in their countries. While, of course, that may be the case, it shouldn't be a surprise how we got there and how they became champions. As we close the book on the 2021 season this weekend, we'll have to see through the summer and to the beginning of next season who was taking notes, who believes in this defensive philosophy, and who was able to make the necessary improvements to get better and possibly become champions next season. So that was a nice short and sweet overview of the 2021 season in Europe, but now let's get into the meat and potatoes of it all. What's at stake here in the final weekend in the major 5 leagues across Europe? Of course, going to start off with the English Premier League and the race for the remaining Champions League and Europa League spots. 2 Champions League spots and 2 Europa League spots remain up for grabs on the final match day of the season. Chelsea go into this weekend just 1 point ahead of both Liverpool and Leicester City in 3rd place, thanks to their 2-1 win versus Leicester in midweek. Liverpool are ahead of Leicester on goal difference, thanks in large part to a stoppage time game-winning goal from the goalkeeper Alisson of all people in their win versus West Brom over this past weekend. West Ham, Tottenham, Everton, and Arsenal all remain alive for Europa League spots. So this is going to be an exciting finish to the season. We think about with Chelsea, they had to get over the disappointment of the FA Cup final loss to Leicester. They turn it around in midweek, able to convert their chances this time and pick up the 3 points in that match. They take on Aston Villa on the final match day. Leicester City, they have a really tough match versus Tottenham, who of course have something to play for, whereas Liverpool, they have to face off versus Crystal Palace. So I would expect Chelsea and Liverpool to find a way to clinch 3rd and 4th place respectively and get into the Champions League, which would put Leicester in 5th place and in that Europa League spot, whereas some of the other clubs will be battling out there for 6th place. Should be an exciting finish. We'll have to see how these clubs look. Of course, Chelsea, they've got a really big match, of course, with the Champions League final. So how do they come out on that Sunday? They don't want anybody else to get hurt. N'Golo Kante had to be subbed off early because he's kind of feeling something in his hamstrings. He didn't want to get hurt for that Champions League final. So we'll have to see how they tackle that. But that's the expectation. Chelsea and Liverpool, I think, will be the ones to clinch those Champions League spots. All right, let's next talk about La Liga and the title showdown shaping up here in the final weekend, with Barcelona collapsing in the second half once again in a 2-1 loss versus Celta Vigo. They've been eliminated from the title race, so we are down to just Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid for the La Liga title. Atletico traveled to Real Valladolid this weekend, who are trying to avoid relegation, while Real Madrid will host 7th place Villarreal, who are trying to shore up their spot in the Europa League. So first off, Barcelona. my goodness. I mean, it's an appropriate way to end their season. They've just been completely horrible, especially in second halves on defense. Once again, blowing another lead. It's just unfathomable to me in terms of the personnel that they have and the way that they play. They shouldn't be doing this, and it's just deserved that they miss out on La Liga this season. Have to think that questions have to be asked of Ronald Koeman and his role as manager there. But in terms of what we do have, Atletico versus Real doesn't get better than this. Rivals coming down to the final part of the season. You've got to think that Atletico, even though they're going up against a side that has so much to play for, I think Valladolid has a chance to avoid relegation if they're able to pick up a victory. Atletico, they, of course, have the title to play for, winning over their rivals. I think they're going to get it done. I don't think it's going to matter what Real Madrid do versus Villarreal. I think Atletico are going to find a way to get the 3 points and to clinch this title, and it's just deserved in terms of the consistency they've been able to have. They had a little bit of a dip here at the beginning of 2021, but they were able to round into form, and down the stretch, they just made less mistakes than what Barcelona and Real Madrid have been doing. So my expectation is Atletico find a way to get it done and clinch the La Liga title here this weekend. Next up, let's talk about the German Bundesliga. We already know that Bayern Munich are the champions. We also know that RB Leipzig are going to finish right behind them in second place. But now we know the two other clubs who have wrapped up a Champions League spot after Eintracht Frankfurt's shocking 4-3 loss to last place Schalke 04 this past weekend. Borussia Dortmund were able to beat Mainz 3-1 to clinch one of the remaining Champions League spots. Joining them is Wolfsburg, who were able to pick up a draw versus Leipzig, a 2-2 draw, but it was enough to help them clinch that final remaining Champions League spot. They are 4 points ahead of Eintracht Frankfurt, which, of course, is the last match here this weekend. So congrats to both of those clubs. With Dortmund, it's important if they want to keep their star players in Erling Haaland and Jadon Sancho. They had to clinch Champions League football. They're able to accomplish that feat. It's still going to be a real fight to keep both of those guys this summer, but this will go a long way in helping them out. And of course, honestly, for both those clubs, you've got Gio Reyna, U.S. men's national team player at Dortmund, and John Brooks at Wolfsburg. An excellent opportunity for them to get some Champions League experience, continue to get more Champions League experience next season. So congrats to both of those clubs on clinching the final remaining Champions League spots. At the other end of the table, after a 2-0 loss versus FC Augsburg this past week, Werder Bremen find themselves in the relegation playoff spot heading into the final match day of the season. They need Arminia Bielefeld to either draw or lose while having a better result themselves versus Borussia Mönchengladbach. If Bielefeld draw, Werder Bremen need a win. If Bielefeld lose, Werder Bremen only need a draw. They have the much superior goal difference, so if they find a way to at least tie on points, Bremen should avoid being in that relegation playoff. And they got to do it, right? They were there this past season. They were able to escape with the win and avoid relegation. They don't want to be in that same spot here 2 years in a row. You can't get that lucky, I would think. So they're going to have to find a way to come up with a result. Borussia Mönchengladbach, very talented offensive side. I don't know how much they have to play for if they're still in contention for a Europa League spot, but still pretty good team. So Werder Bremen are going to have to find a way to come up with a huge result there and hopefully get some help with Arminia Bielefeld dropping some points. So we'll have to see if St. Louis and Josh Sargent and Werder Bremen once again have to find themselves and fight their way out of the relegation playoff, hoping they are able to avoid it here this weekend. Moving right along to Serie A and the absolute chaos that is the race for Champions League here on the final match day. 4 clubs are in contention for the 3 remaining Champions League spots because we already know that Inter Milan are the champions. Those clubs would be Atalanta, AC Milan, Napoli, and of course the reigning champions, Juventus. AC Milan were the only one of those 4 clubs to drop points this past week, while Juventus were able to come up with a very impressive 3-2 win versus Inter Milan to stay in contention. Biggest match this weekend has to be 2 of those clubs facing off against each other. That would be Atalanta versus AC Milan. Juventus will travel to take on 11th place Bologna, while Napoli will host 10th place Hellas Verona. So a very exciting race to conclude the Serie A season here for the remaining Champions League spots. Obviously, the big result to watch out for this weekend is Atalanta versus AC Milan. See if one or both clubs drop points. That, of course, would open the door for Napoli and Juventus, who I think are both going to find a way to win their respective matches. I just got to think that Juventus are going to find a way to get one of these Champions League spots, right? Because if they don't, there's a lot on the line. Cristiano Ronaldo could potentially leave if they're not able to clinch Champions League football. Think about AC Milan, all the work they've done to revamp that club, and now they have the opportunity to get Champions League. What if they miss out with the loss to Atalanta? We have a small advantage. I believe they're 1 point up on those 3 other clubs. So that's at least something to take away. But of course, if they lose, that can all go away extremely quickly. So we're just going to have to see. That's going to be a toss-up between those 2 clubs. I think Juventus and Napoli win. So that will set up a very frenetic finish here for the remaining Champions League spots in Italy. And lastly, let's talk about the other undecided title, which is in Ligue 1 in France. Lille's 0-0 draw versus Saint Etienne this past week leaves them with just a 1-point advantage over PSG headed into the final match day. Lille will travel to take on 12th place Angers, while PSG will travel to take on 16th place Brest. So again, Lille dropped points here this past result. That was their last air, right? They have to come up with the victory. PSG are going to beat Brest. I can guarantee that. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm telling you right now, that's probably the easiest bet that you've got this weekend. So Lille have to come up with the 3 points versus Angers. They've been playing great defense this past season. They kept a clean sheet in this match. They just weren't able to get on the score sheet. So they've got to find a way. I got to think that they'll be able to do it. I think they're going to win this title. It would be a huge upset to topple PSG and what they've been able to do in League One. To come away with a narrow 1-point victory in the table, I think would be super impressive for Lille and very exciting to see here in European football. So I think they're going to do it, but there's no margin for error. Definitely could easily see a scenario where Lille draw, especially, and PSG come up with the win and are able to hold on to their title. So exciting finish there. Again, 2 clubs battling out on the final match day. Doesn't get any better than that. Exciting to see who comes away with the title in France. So that's what's on the line here in the final weekend of the Big 5 leagues across Europe. Very excited to keep up with the action this weekend and see who comes out on top and who is able to stave off relegation. Now let's get to something that isn't going to go down here for at least a couple more weeks, but it's going to be one of the biggest stories of the summer, so I thought I'd start covering it now. I'm, of course, talking about Euro 2020, still aptly named Euro 2020, despite the fact that it didn't go down last year. It's going down this year. They're going to keep the name, which I think is kind of cool. Roster announcements have been happening over this past week. I want to get to some of the biggest ones here and also talk a little bit about some of the players who will be missing out. So I'm going to start off with the reigning World Cup champions. That would, of course, be the French national team. They made their roster announcement this past week. Star-studded as per usual and as expected, but there was a name on there that was a little bit of a surprise. I'm, of course, talking about Real Madrid striker Karim Benzema. Benzema was included in this French squad. He has not featured for the national team since October of 2015 due to his involvement with the scandal with former national team teammate Mathieu Valbuena, where he has been alleged to have pressured Valbuena into paying off blackmailers, threatening to release a sex tape that he was involved in. Benzema will stand on trial for these allegations here in October. It's been a very terrible situation. If you don't know much about it, I would encourage you to read up on it. It was very ugly how things played out with Valbuena and Benzema. Benzema then accused current French team manager Didier Deschamps of bowing to the racist part of France. Very ugly fallout between those two. They hadn't spoken in a number of years, but things kind of picked up here recently. They were able to work things out, and Benzema is now being included. Deschamps has always said that he would do what was best for the French national team. They've been missing a little bit up top there. Now you add Benzema to Kylian Mbappe and Antoine Griezmann to form a very terrifying front three for the French national team. Going to be very excited to see them at full strength. Of course, they've got the likes of Paul Pogba and N'Golo Kante in the midfield. Defense, it's a little bit weaker than what they had at the World Cup, but it should still be enough. They're obviously going to be one of the big favorites here to win this tournament. But very interesting inclusion of Benzema, but I'm excited to see what he can bring to the national team at this point in his career. Up next, like I said, a handful of stars have been ruled out for Euro 2020 due to injury over this past week. First off, Netherlands center back Virgil van Dijk confirmed that he will not be participating in this summer's tournament due to the continued rehab of an ACL injury that basically cost him the whole season with Liverpool. Elsewhere, Swedish striker Zlatan Ibrahimovic will be out for Euro 2020 due to a knee injury he picked up with AC Milan. Ibrahimovic came out of a 5-year retirement in March in hopes of playing for Sweden at Euro 2020, but he has been ruled out. And lastly, German goalkeeper and Barcelona goalkeeper Marc-Andre ter Stegen has also been ruled out for Euro 2020 due to him going for a procedure on his knee. It's kind of been an ongoing issue with him over the past couple of seasons. He's had different problems with his knees, so he has been ruled out for Euro 2020 because of that. So, few stars there. Ter Stegen, I don't know if he would have started over Manuel Neuer at the Euros for Germany, but still, he's a pretty big name. Zlatan, obviously, would have been cool to see him come out of retirement for Sweden, but he has been ruled out. With Van Dijk, it's obviously the best decision for him. in terms of not throwing himself into such a high-level type of atmosphere right off of an ACL injury. So I understand. Just was looking forward to seeing him back on the pitch, possibly combining with De Ligt there in the defense of the Netherlands. But unfortunately, we won't get to see that. But still, I have to look out for these injury news and injury exemptions and see who will be missing out Euro 2020 and see if there are any more big names that won't be playing. Moving on, Germany announced their Euro 2020 squad this week, and they have included veterans Thomas Müller and Mats Hummels in their team. Hummels and Müller were both told by current manager Jogi Löw that their international careers were over in 2019, but they've been brought back due to their form at their clubs over this past season, as well as the lack of development of some of the younger players. Obviously, with what they've been doing at Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich respectively, they definitely deserve this call-up. It's interesting to see Löw kind of go back on what he said. He wanted to basically get rid of some of the older players after that embarrassment at the 2018 World Cup, start bringing in these younger players, but things haven't worked out as expected. Obviously, performance at this tournament is at a premium, so you want to bring in your best players, and that's what Löw has done here. Obviously, this is his last tournament as well. He said he would be stepping down, so he wants to go out with the bang. You have to think if someone like a Timo Werner or a Kai Havertz were on form with Chelsea, that they wouldn't need to bring in Müller up top, but that is what has happened. Some of the young players have either been injured or they're just not in form, so that's why Müller's been brought in up top, and Hummels has been brought in at the back. No Jerome Boateng or Julian Draxler or some of the other veterans for Germany here. They're going with much younger players. Still a very talented group. A lot of Bayern Munich people. You got Leon Goretzka. You got Joshua Kimmich. And of course, you've got the Chelsea boys and Havertz and Werner. A lot to like about this German team still, but it's going to be interesting to see how the pieces come together. But still, bring in a couple of veterans here for Euro 2020. And lastly, just some other roster announcements I saw over this past week. Kevin De Bruyne, Eden Hazard, and Romelu Lukaku headline Belgium's roster for Euro 2020. A lot of offensive talent there. Defense leaves a little bit left to be desired in terms of the age of some of those players, but still a very talented group there with Belgium. Italy announced a provisional 33-man squad with a lot of old heads on defense like Chiellini and Bonucci, whereas there's also a lot of attacking talent. You got Ciro Immobile, Lorenzo Insigne, you got Federico Chiesa from Juventus. It's going to be a very fun team to watch there under former Manchester City manager Roberto Mancini. Elsewhere, you've got the likes of Poland, Austria, some of these other smaller countries making the roster announcements. We're still waiting on the likes of England, who will be announcing next week, Spain, and Portugal. But again, this is a very exciting time to see all of these players who are making the roster for Euro 2020. It's going to be a huge tournament. I'll continue to have more coverage going forward of what's going down, but still, very exciting time here in the calendar. As we're about to end the domestic season, we will quickly transition into this summer's biggest tournament. All right, let's get to some soccer in America. I'm going to start off with MLS. And before I get to this weekend's slate of matches, I want to talk about a couple of news stories. Going back to what I talked about on last week's episode. After a lengthy discussion with some of the members of their supporters groups, Columbus SC agreed to revert back to the original Columbus Crew name for the club, as well as some tweaks to the brand new logo. Members of the front office and ownership were there for Columbus. They had a nice little meeting there. It was quickly agreed upon what the changes were going to be. They also implemented a system going forward for members of the supporters group to communicate with the front office. So all's well that kind of ends well here. Really happy to see the return of the Columbus Crew name. That is what makes them stand out. That is who they should be. The logo, it's not perfect, but at least the fans got some say in it in the end. So you'll be able to work with it going forward. The main thing is that Columbus Crew name should not change. That is who they are. That is what they've been known for, especially coming off of an MLS Cup win. That's who they should be. So I'm glad fans spoke up, that they were heard, that they were brought in, and they were consulted. This is how it has to be going forward. Please, MLS clubs, clubs elsewhere, please bring in your fans. They're the lifeblood of your club. Listen to them, and things will end up okay in the end. So again, glad the situation resolved. Columbus Crew back with MLS here with that name. The other news story I want to talk about is New York Red Bulls and U.S. men's national team center back Aaron Long being ruled out for the remainder of the 2021 season after he ruptured his right Achilles tendon in the Red Bulls' previous match versus the Philadelphia Union. Long has arguably been the Red Bulls' best player over the years, making 140 league and cup appearances for the club. This is a huge blow for not just the Red Bulls, but for the U.S. men's national team. Long was one of the favorites to possibly pair with John Brooks at World Cup qualifying, potentially further on in the World Cup. It's been great for the Red Bulls. He potentially could have made a move to Europe over these past couple of seasons, but he wasn't able to do so. Now, of course, he's hit with this injury blow. So tough news to hear for him. Hoping he comes up with a speedy recovery and continues to rehab and to move forward. And hopefully he's back soon with not just the Red Bulls, but with the national team. All right, so like I said, looking ahead to the weekend slate here in MLS, a lot of interesting matchups on the docket with Portland Timbers versus the LA Galaxy tomorrow afternoon on ABC being the headliner. Very excited to see that. Obviously, with Logan Kerr coming up, we'll see if he gets another start for Portland. On the other side, Chicharito and the Galaxy, they've been pretty much on fire. Besides the loss to the Seattle Sounders, they've won all of their other matches, and Chicharito still scoring goals, still contributing. So that's going to be a very exciting matchup to watch. Also on Saturday, you have NYCFC hosting the Columbus Crew and San Jose Earthquakes hosting Sporting Kansas City. That's a couple of the top clubs there in the Western Conference. On Sunday, the top team in MLS, Seattle Sounders FC, will be hosting Atlanta United FC. Really cool matchup there. And also you've got Nashville SC hosting Austin FC, a couple of the newest clubs there in MLS. So those are the matchups I'm looking forward to this weekend. Obviously, Seattle, they're a little bit ahead of everybody else right now. They're going to be taking on Atlanta. I believe they're in a playoff spot currently in the Eastern Conference. So one of the better clubs right now. We got Joseph Martinez versus Raul Ruiz-Diaz. Very exciting matchup there. So again, another great weekend coming up here in MLS. We'll have to see who will continue their momentum and stay near the top of the respective tables here early on in the season. All right, moving on to talk some women's soccer. And before I get to the NWSL, we have to talk about that Champions League final. Barcelona scored a goal in the very first minute of the match, and they never looked back as they crushed Chelsea 4-0 to win their first ever Champions League trophy. Despite not getting on the score sheet, Barcelona forwards Jennifer Hermoso and Leaky Mertens were involved in several of Barcelona's goals as their high press completely suffocated Chelsea, who were out of sorts for most of the match. This was just shocking to watch. Barcelona were on Chelsea from the jump. You had that crazy sequence where Mertens hit the crossbar, and then it happened to be an own goal on Chelsea. Then, of course, Chelsea foul Hermoso in the box, and it's 2-0 before you can even blink. And then, of course, the two other goals that were added on in that half. Chelsea couldn't get out of their own way. They were suffocated by that press. They tried to go to a more direct style of play. It worked a little bit, but they were just not able to feed their offensive talent further up the pitch. Just unfortunate occurrence there. Chelsea had a great season, but they did not look Champions League final material here. Credit to Barcelona. They've been absolutely dominant in their domestic league, now getting their first Champions League trophy. It was well-deserved. Great game plan, great execution. It was just mesmerizing to watch what they were able to do versus Chelsea. So very impressive victory for Barcelona. New blood reigning atop the Champions League final here for the women. Excited to see next year this competition. Can Barcelona defend? Will Lyon make a comeback? How do Chelsea fare with this loss? A lot of great storylines looking forward to next season. All right, let's get to some NWSL news. And the big headline this week is the return of a couple of headline players. U.S. Women's National Team and Manchester City duo Sam Mewis and Rose Lavelle will be returning from Manchester City to the NWSL for the remainder of the season. Mewis will return to the North Carolina Courage, whereas Lavelle will join with OL Reign, who were able to acquire her rights in a trade last year. A couple of big pickups here for the NWSL returning. Mewis had a fantastic season for Manchester City. I believe she scored 13 goals, but she is a welcome presence back for the NC Courage, who had a pretty decent Challenge Cup, but now with the addition of Mewis, look completely different. Lavelle, of course, is going to join that star-studded OL Reign team. She had a tough season with Manchester City. She didn't get much playing time near the end, so hopefully she's able to rediscover her form here in the NWSL. Both of those players, they were involved with Manchester City. I believe they were second in the FA Women's Super League there with Manchester City. They got to the quarterfinals in the Champions League, so pretty successful reign there with Manchester City. But excited to have Mewis and Lavelle back in the NWSL. Looking ahead to this weekend in the NWSL, there are a lot of good matchups to look forward to, but of course the big one being that derby between Portland Thorns FC and OL Reign. The reigning NWSL Challenge Cup champions sent a message in week one when they outscored the entire league in their 5-0 beatdown of the Chicago Red Stars. Just truly incredible to watch what Portland were able to do there. Sophia Smith getting a couple of goals, looking excellent. Quite the statement to make in week one, but of course a big test for them in week two, facing their rivals who are expected to get, again, all those Lyon players that I've mentioned over the past couple of weeks. Rose Lavelle is on her way. I'm not sure how many of those players are going to feature this Sunday, but it's going to be a completely different looking OL Reign team. It's going to be a fantastic rivalry between these two this season. Looking forward to this first edition in the regular season. But yeah, going forward, this is definitely going to be the matchup to watch in the NWSL. Can anybody stop Portland? That's been their theme so far. They have not lost. They barely even dropped points and have that dominant 5-0 win in week 1. We'll have to see what the Reign can do here against them in week 2. All right, let's discuss some of the action for the past week in the USL Championship. And of course, I got to start off with that big match this past Saturday on ESPN2 in a matchup of the reigning conference champions. The Tampa Bay Rowdies were able to defeat Phoenix Rising FC by a score of 2-1 after getting a very early goal in the 4th minute. Striker Steven Dos Santos added another for Tampa Bay in the 61st before Phoenix's Santi Moar scored his 3rd goal of the season to make things interesting in the second half. But Tampa Bay were able to hold on. A very early statement there by Tampa Bay. It was pretty kind of heated affair. There was a little bit of back and forth there in the second half between the two clubs. But still, these are definitely the two top clubs in the USL Championship. It was just nice to see them face off here early on in the regular season. Could we see them again in the playoffs? There's a decent chance of that, but still very impressive by Tampa Bay, who maintained their perfect start to the season. Some other results that caught my eye from the past week, you had Rio Grande Valley FC Toros maintain their perfect start to the season with a 2-1 win versus San Antonio FC. Former St. Louis FC player Russell Cicerone scored his first goal of the season for Pittsburgh Riverhounds SC, but they were held to a 1-1 draw versus Hartford Athletic. The big result was in midweek when FC Tulsa, who I've been hyping up here on the show, were pummeled by Atlanta United 2 by a score of 5-0. Just incredible to see what happened in this match. It was late on in the first half when Atlanta were able to score 4 goals in the span of 13 minutes to close out that first half. Just shocking to see from Tulsa. After they had conceded a couple of goals, they were really going for it to try to get back in the match. And that, of course, left things open on the other end of the field, which Atlanta were able to take advantage of. I think this is just a blip on the radar, but still quite shocking to see a team that's been as good as Tulsa lose this badly. So definitely an eye-opening result there, leading us into this upcoming weekend of matches. The matches I'm looking forward to this weekend, starting off with Louisville City FC versus San Diego Loyal. The Loyal have had a tough start to their season. I don't believe they've won a match yet. We'll see if they can bounce back against the Louisville team, still trying to find their identity. And of course, that matchup got even more exciting with a new story I'll talk about here in just a little bit. Another cool matchup to look out for, and that would be San Antonio FC versus Birmingham Legion FC. Kind of contrasting styles here. You got San Antonio with that great attack they have versus Birmingham Legion, who've been keeping all of their matches close. They've been winning with a defensive type style. They just beat Memphis 1-0, I believe, last weekend. So interesting contrast there between those two clubs. And then lastly, El Paso Locomotive FC. Now that Logan Ketterer has moved on, how do they handle things in life in the USL Championship? They will be taking on the perfect Rio Grande Valley FC Toros. So again, pretty good matchup there between those two clubs. But again, another cool slate of matches in the USL Championship this weekend. Looking forward to another great week in this league. All right, now it's time to get to all of that St. Louis soccer news. I'm going to start off with a report from ESPN this week, which stated that U.S. men's national team striker and native St. Louis and Josh Sargent could be leaving Werder Bremen this summer. Sources indicate that the club are strapped for cash due to the pandemic, and they are, of course, also facing a potential relegation. Sargent is open to a move, according to sources, but he wishes to stay in the Bundesliga with the likes of Eintracht Frankfurt, Bayer Leverkusen, Borussia Mönchengladbach, and Stuttgart tabbed in this article. So very interesting news here. Would be an exciting opportunity for Sargent to stay in the Bundesliga and potentially move up with a different club. The likes of Leverkusen and Mönchengladbach and Eintracht Frankfurt, who are near the top of the table, would be really cool opportunities to see him play there. Of course, all of those clubs have pretty good attacking talent, so it'd be interesting to see how he would fit there. Stuttgart offers an excellent opportunity potentially for the amount of playing time that he's been getting with Werder Bremen lately. So we'll have to see. Don't know which is the correct move, but I definitely think staying in the Bundesliga is the right call. So we'll have to see how Werder Bremen's finish up the season. Of course, it'll be extended if they're in that relegation playoff. If they're able to stay up in the Bundesliga, we'll just have to see how things go. But it'll be interesting to see if Sargent makes the move up to a different club in the Bundesliga. Next up, Louisville City FC announced yesterday the signing of former St. Louis FC striker Kyle Gregg. Gregg is 5th on the all-time scoring list in USL Championship history with 57 regular season league goals, 3 of which were scored last season in the abbreviated year. Very exciting finally to see Kyle Gregg signed. It's been way too long. Great to see him get this opportunity with one of the best clubs in the USL Championship. Obviously, it's a little bit awkward considering that Louisville have been rivals with St. Louis all of those years, but still, it's important to get Kyle this opportunity. Very excited to see him continue his career add to that great goal-scoring tally he already has. And again, nobody deserves it better. He was a part of 2 playoff teams and, of course, that great U.S. Open Cup run with St. Louis FC. Wishing him nothing but the best and excited to see him take the next step here in his career. All right, the next news story concerns soccer that actually happened here in St. Louis, and that, of course, would be St. Louis Scott Gallagher opening up their USL League 2 season. They began play this past Tuesday night at home at the Soccer Park versus the Des Moines Menace, but unfortunately they dropped a close 1-0 decision. SLU goalkeeper Patrick Schulte and Xavier's Jansen Miller highlighted the initial starting 11, who were under pressure for most of the match before Des Moines' Kingsford Adji scored the match's only goal in the 57th minute. So I thought this was a pretty good first match for St. Louis Scott Gallagher. Obviously, the roster isn't completely filled out yet. They're still waiting on a number of different players. Some of these guys have only trained for a couple of days, so the fact that you were able to keep things close here and almost pick up a result is quite impressive. Obviously, Des Moines were on them from the jump. They created a lot of pressure, and they weren't able to create a lot of chances until later on in the first half, and of course, when they needed to push for an equalizer. I had the chance to talk to head coach Steve Trisciu after the match about the performance, and this is what he had to say.
We started off shaky, which I really expected it, but I thought as we settled down, we did some decent things. I think defensively, Jansen and Chase were fantastic back there. Actually, the whole back four, and then Schulte also. But it's just kind of piecing it together. As the game settled down, we were trying to find a little bit more space wide, but they did a good job of pressing the ball and making us turn over. Losing 1-0 to this team right here, I think obviously it's not the best result we want, but I saw some things out there that we can be better at, and I think if we get better at some of those small things, we'll be all right.
As far as a player's perspective on the performance, Phil Grooms of Flyover Footy was generous enough to pass along his audio and his conversation with Jansen Miller. So here's a little bit from that conversation.
It was hard, difficult, a team that hasn't lost in 3 years, but I feel like we showed well defensively. That's what we were trying to do, have a good defensive showing. I feel like we showed it. One mental lapse, but I think as a whole we fought, and I think last 30 minutes we did well against them, but I think Thursday will come out. We needed a game under us. They've been practicing for 4 weeks. We've only had 1 week of practice, and a lot of guys have been in and out with finals, but I feel like it was good to have that first game. But 1-0, I can't complain that much.
So some good perspective there from Coach Trisciu and from Jansen Miller. On Thursday, these two clubs met again in another back-and-forth contest. However, it was Des Moines once again picking up the full 3 points, winning the match 2-1. Former St. Louis FC player Danny Fisher opened the scoring for the Menace in the 12th minute with a nice back post finish. However, St. Louis Scott Gallagher were able to respond this time. Early on in the second half, it was Al Sadiq Hassan who was able to get into the box and fire off a shot that just squared past the goalkeeper Holden Trent. However, deep into stoppage time, it was that man once again, Kingsford Adji for Des Moines, who was able to round the goalkeeper Patrick Schulte and slide in his shot for the game-winning goal. St. Louis Scott Gallagher will look for their first win this season next week when they take on FC Wichita. So again, in this match, St. Louis Scott Gallagher, they looked a lot better. They were able to create more chances. Obviously, they get on the board there. It's just tough to see them concede so late into stoppage time and to not be able to pick up any points in this matchup. But still, a lot of improvement here. They face one of the toughest teams that they're going to face this season, and they only lost by a goal in either one of those matches. Reinforcements are on the way, so I'm excited to see how this team will look going forward. And yeah, it'll be an interesting matchup versus FC Wichita. We'll see who will be available for St. Louis Scott Gallagher. But again, pretty impressive start this season when you consider all that they've had to work with. And again, we're really excited to see what they can do going forward. As far as some of those players who are not yet with St. Louis Scott Gallagher, they were quite busy. In the final of this year's NCAA Division I Men's Soccer Championship, Marshall narrowly defeated Indiana 1-0 in OT. St. Louis area natives Joey Mayer, Daniel Mooney, and AJ Palazzolo featured for either the majority of the match or for its entirety, with Mooney coming up with a couple of shots for the Hoosiers. So a disappointing result for those guys, but still a fantastic season for them to get all the way to the final of the Division I Soccer Championship. Spirited effort, Marshall, no joke. They were able to get on quite a run here at the tournament. Were able to come up with that one goal in overtime. But still, great season for those guys. Excited to see those guys, as well as a couple of other players, make the trek back to St. Louis and hopefully feature for St. Louis Scott Gallagher here soon. Well, for my guest this week, I'm very excited to reconnect with someone who I had on my very first episode of the show and someone who is coming off of a couple of great performances in the USL Championship. Hope you enjoy. Well, I'm honored to be joined by this week a member of the USL Championship Team of the Week who earned that nomination for his performance in the Tampa Bay Rowdies 2-1 victory over Phoenix Rising FC. midfielder Lewis Hilton. Lewis, thanks for joining me again.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Well, again, wanted to catch up with you. It's been a while, and of course, you're coming off of a huge victory this past weekend. It was on ESPN2, Rowdies versus Phoenix Rising FC, both the reigning conference champions, and you guys were able to come away with the victory. Obviously, getting that early goal helped in the match, but I thought you guys controlled the match overall for the majority of it. How are you guys able to successfully pull that off?
Yeah, no, it was always going to be a tough game against Phoenix. Really good side with a lot of like good players, especially going forward, like a lot of creative players. So I think we did a good job like preparing for what they had to offer to the game. But ultimately it was kind of about us and what we needed to do to win the game. And I think we kind of executed the game plan, what we set out to do, pretty well. And like you said, I think we probably deserved to win the game and controlled the game at times as well. So but yeah, getting the early goal definitely helped. I guess gave us a little bit more confidence, and we had a few more chances. Honestly, it could have been 2-3 up within the first 15-20 minutes. So I think we made a really good start to the game, and that helped. And then second half, when we had to dig in and defend a bit deeper when needed, we did that and defended our box well. But I feel like we were dangerous throughout the game as well.
So you hear it in professional sports all the time, right? It's just another game, or you just play the teams on your schedule and every match is equally the same. But last time we had talked, it was before the USL Championship final where you were set to face Phoenix. That didn't happen, unfortunately. So when the schedule came out and you saw this match on the schedule, and of course in the build up to it and of course playing in it, I have to assume that there's at least a little bit of extra motivation that you guys actually got to face them this time around, correct?
Yeah, no, I think we talked about it all week, and all the staff's like interviews and my teammates' interviews. We said it's just another game, and to be fair, it's just the third game of the season, and it only counts for 3 points. But I'd be lying if I wasn't saying there was extra motivation for us just because of how it ended last year. And I think for the rest of like our careers as players on this team, we'll kind of always have a bittersweet feeling about the 2020 season, not being able to finish it, and it just kind of being a strange year all round. So I think there was a bit more motivation, and even without what happened last year, playing against a top team, and you're getting a lot more buzz about the game, being on national TV, I think it's only natural that motivation goes up a little bit. But yeah, ultimately it was just another game. It only counts for another 3 points. But yeah, like I said, I think the boys were a little more fired up easier to get fired up for that one than maybe other games, you know.
So the match goes on. You play the full 90 for the second match in a row. Your corner kick helped spur that move on for the second goal. And of course, you were involved throughout the entirety of the match, breaking up play, your passes. I think you had like 5 key passes or so in this match. The performance, like I said, earns you a nomination to USL Championship Team of the Week. It's not your first nomination, and my prediction is it's not going to be your last. But in terms of, getting that nomination after playing in a match like this, it has to have a little bit of more of a special feeling for you, correct?
I think every player wants to play in the biggest games and play at the highest level. And I think based on last year, our 2 clubs were the 2 strongest teams. And obviously, like I said, there was a lot of hype around that game. So they're the type of games you want to be involved with, and you want to try and contribute in those games. And I think I was able to do that, like you said, with my set piece. And then I think throughout the game, I was able to get involved. So it's always good to kind of contribute, help the team win those big games. Just focus on the next game and take it from there.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about a different dynamic that you guys have for this season. You're already a loaded offensive team, but in the USL Championship Team of the Week, your teammate Steven Dos Santos was also included. You guys, the Rowdies signed him in the offseason to join you guys. He already leads the club in shots this season. He has a couple goals. Talk to me a little bit about his presence and what he has brought to your guys' side so far this season.
Yeah, no, he's been brilliant so far. The first 3 games he's really helped the team a lot. goals and creating chances. And he kind of offers something different than what we had last year. He's such a big guy. I think he's 6'3" or 4" or something, and he's so strong. And it just kind of gives us another option. Obviously, we try and play out of the back and get the ball on the floor and kind of try to play through the thirds and get the ball wide. But in certain games, there's teams that will make that difficult, and to have the option to maybe go a little bit more direct and to play off him and get him to kind of hold the ball up. And if we need to get crosses in the box, and he's a perfect player to kind of help with that. So it's just a great another option for the team, because we've got a really good squad and every single player has different attributes. And Stephen comes in and does something that we probably didn't have last year. So it's just another way for us to kind of be dangerous and another way for us to attack.
So another thing that kind of stood out to me during the match, because obviously it was national television on ESPN2, was the crowds. I remember last time we'd been speaking about going through the 2020 season without playing in front of a crowd. As things have slowly improved, you guys have been able to build up the people who've been let in. It's a decent-sized crowd for this past match. How have things been with that? What's it been like playing in front of a crowd again?
Yeah, no, Saturday was awesome. We have a pretty good group of loyal supporters here that kind of try and make it loud and a good atmosphere, and they have the chants and the drums and the smoke bombs and stuff. So it's always better to play in front of the fans. It kind of gives you that extra little buzz, makes it feel more of a professional environment and like a meaningful game, rather than kind of playing behind closed doors like the majority of last year was. So it's amazing seeing that. And then looking forward to hopefully it kind of progressing throughout this year, and hopefully be able to be back to full capacity at some point. And that'll be an even better feeling, getting the stands full, and it just gives you an extra buzz as a player. Really looking forward to that progressing as well.
So we're only a few games left into this season. You guys maintained a perfect start so far. You haven't dropped any points. And obviously it's a little bit of a different format than it was in 2020. But in terms of having a full slate of matches again, right? Because last year was kind of shortened. You got a full slate this year. You're playing a little bit more familiar type of opponents. It's a little bit of a stronger structure in terms of that. And then also what you go through on a week-by-week basis in terms of the uplifting of different protocols. Do you feel a little bit more sense of normalcy? Do things feel like, in terms of the process from week to week, things are more of a sturdier pace now?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think the majority of our squad and the staff were fortunate enough to have the option to get the vaccine. And we're back in the locker rooms and stuff now, and being able to go into the gym and use the training rooms and all the facilities. It just makes it a lot easier to kind of prepare and train every single week. So it's definitely a good feeling, and something you took for granted last year, because we were kind of using the car park as with tents as the locker room, and having to shower outside and stuff, which obviously, like, I understood why these things were in place, but having all the facilities back this year is great, and it just kind of makes everyone's lives a lot easier, and for us as players makes it easier to kind of do our jobs and try and be best prepared to play on a Saturday.
So let's move away from Rowdies for just a second, talk about some other stuff. I know from over the years knowing you that you're a rabid West Ham United supporter, and obviously we're into the final weekend of the Premier League season, and they have an opportunity at Europa League football, which is still European football, and a chance at the Champions League. I know from watching West Ham over the past few seasons, consistency has seemed to be lacking, but this season has been quite impressive, what they've been able to put together. How have you felt about this season?
Yeah, it's been an incredible season. I've really, really enjoyed watching them, to be fair, because like you say, most years you don't really know what you're going to get with West Ham. Like, obviously last year we kind of were in a relegation scrap, and I remember when the break happened with COVID, we were kind of in and around the bottom teams, and I wasn't expecting at all for this year to play out the way it has. And obviously being with one game to go, and we have a really strong chance that's in our hands. All we need is a point on Saturday to get into the Europa League. Like, it's incredible. And we've played some really good stuff. We've got some really exciting players, good to watch. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and can't say I was expecting it too much, to be honest.
Who's been your favorite so far this season?
Oh, I think it has to be Lingard. Since he's joined, he's just been like on fire, giving us another kind of boost of energy to keep us going. Because obviously, first half of the season we did great, but since he's come in, he's just been, yeah, just incredible. Like creating chances, scoring goals, and in with a shout to get into the England team. But I think you got the whole attacking line. We've got Fornals, Ben Rama, Yarmolenko, Bowen, Antonio. All of them just like have been really good, really creative, and fun to watch. And obviously Souček and Soufal that have come in, the Czech boys have been brilliant as well. And obviously Declan Rice is probably one of my favourite players as well. So yeah, I could name the whole team there. So
exactly.
Yeah, I've been really enjoyed watching them, to be honest.
No, it's been fun to see Lingard bounce back and see some of the other players, kind of round into form since joining West Ham. But Lewis, I also want to ask your perspective because you're a fan of a non-six club in the EPL. And I also think as a player, you offer good perspective. And of course, being from England, you offer great perspective. In terms of, we didn't get to talk about this obviously because this is recently developed, but the attempt to form a European Super League by some of the bigger clubs, most of which were from the English Premier League. I want to get your thoughts on that a little bit in terms of the perspective of what those clubs were doing versus what it would have as an impact to all the other clubs, not just in the English Premier League, but all the clubs in England, really, right?
Yeah, no, massively. It was a bit of a disgrace, really, that that those clubs would kind of put that together and try to make it happen. And I think, especially with how last year had been, there's been so many like clubs in the lower leagues of England that have struggled financially, and have had to furlough staff, and players have struggled to find jobs and stuff like that. And then you have the six richest teams try and figure out how they can make like billions more money rather than finding ways to help all the other teams in England. I think it was kind of like extremely bad timing, and even the concept of it, I really don't like. The whole history of English football has kind of been based on how the competition's fair. Like you see the FA Cup, you see teams getting promoted, like teams like Bournemouth that get into the Premier League and get to play against all the teams that are extremely wealthy. I think that's what makes English football so special. It's so unpredictable, and you can't like what they kind of tried to put forward really kind of took that away. And it was like, yeah, pretty disappointing to see that happen. And I think it really kind of like goes against all that the English football has kind of been about, really. Yeah, so it's disappointing, and I was glad to see the reaction of all the fans, to be honest, and the feedback that happened pretty much straight away. And I'm glad it looks like it's not gonna come to fruition in the end. So it's good to see, really.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective. I think you offer a lot there. And I think that the cool thing was, American fans it's kind of an Americanized concept, this league.
Yeah.
And I think it was really cool to see American fans be as outraged as, European and other fans across the world. It kind of shows how much the game has grown here, that people can kind of realize what was happening during this type of situation, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, no, I would say it did kind of try to make it into like obviously how the American sports is run, but I think football in England has been going on for hundreds of years now, and it's always been the same way. And there's so much history behind it, and that's the way it's always been. Because obviously in the States over here, like soccer's still pretty new, and it's kind of it's in a good place right now. Obviously, the MLS is doing well. The USL is improving every single year. But compared to how the English system and pyramid is, the US system is still pretty fragile. Just because if you look at like an MLS team that are spending millions on players and on their club, I think if they were to get relegated into the USL, like I think the disparity between the leagues is just too big right now for anything like that to happen. I hope in the future that the US can get into a position where promotion and relegation can be done sustainably. But I just think right now it's still in a kind of a fragile state to kind of implement that. But yeah, like you said, it's good that the American fans can maybe realize why that kind of closed system isn't a good thing for competition.
All right, so let's wrap up here, shifting focus back to the Rowdies. There's no rest for the weary. You guys faced your in-state rivals, the Miami FC, here this weekend. They've been playing a little bit better than they did last year in terms of the results. They picked up a couple of early wins. What type of challenge will they pose to you guys?
Yeah, no, they're a really good team with a lot of good players. Yeah, one of my best friends actually plays down there, Paco Craig, and I stay in touch with him a lot. And he's been really quite positive about their team, and they've had some good results so far. Obviously, it's still early days, and I think they brought in a lot of new players, so they're kind of still trying to gel. So it'll definitely be a tough test. But yeah, like I said, we kind of try and focus on what we need to do to win the game, and our preparation is the same every single week. And yeah, I think we're playing well so far, and I think everyone's pretty confident, and hopefully we can take that into this weekend, and hopefully it'll be another 3 points and another good performance.
Well, I know people, outside of the Florida area will be able to see that match on ESPN Plus. And again, you guys have maintained a perfect start this season. We'll see if you'll be able to continue it this weekend. Lewis, again, congrats on your recent performance and your nomination USL Championship Team of the Week. Looking forward to seeing you back out there on the pitch this weekend. Thanks for joining me again.
Yeah, thank you. No problem.
My thanks to Lewis for joining me once again on the show. That'll do it for this episode of the Gateway to Soccer Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Excited to get out to the soccer park again next week for St. Louis Scott Gallagher's matchup versus FC Wichita. Of course, there'll be plenty of soccer to discuss, with it being the final weekend of the European domestic seasons. Lots of great soccer going on in America as well. And of course, there'll be also a lot more St. Louis soccer news. So again, very excited. Enjoy this weekend of soccer. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Thanks again.